April 13th, 2022. Yes, well, let's hit a few issues today. I'll start off with the big thing that most people are kind of focused on is inflation. Of course, we all heard that the inflation rate hit annualized year over year 8.5% yesterday. Well, that was actually through the end of March, of course. And so that's another new high in our own ongoing inflation surge, driven by a variety of factors, obviously. I mean, I don't think the $1.9 trillion needless spending bill that the Democrats passed about this time last year, thereabouts, helped any at all. And then, of course, there were ongoing things that were going to happen anyhow as the economy recovered from the shutdowns. And then, of course, we have the Ukraine war, which didn't help any either. And the various sanctions on Russia, which, of course, if people are trying to scurry to find alternate sources of oil from the Russian sources, obviously that will have an effect of driving up prices. However, other buyers, probably being forced out of the higher price market, will probably find the cheaper Russian oil now, which is being sold at a discount, still at a very high price compared to the pre-war levels, probably an attractive buy, as I pointed out in a previous video. But another another thing we'd have to look at in this whole situation, of course, is the fact that the initial stock market reaction yesterday to this number was the market rallied for most of the day until it finally waned and fell at a lower close, I should say, at the end of the day. And that's due to the fact that the so-called core inflation rate, which is considered to be a leading economic indicator, which takes out the food and the energy prices and deals with other issues, was a lot lower. And it was year over year at 6.5%, so that's 2% lower. And I think the general thought was that that indicated that ultimately this inflation trend will abate over time, especially because the Fed is presumably tightening money now and will presumably be tightening money for most of the year through higher interest rates and actually basically selling mortgage securities that they bought up during the economic crisis into the general market. Or that's a technique, or bonds also. That's a technique that they use to take money out of the system and effectively slow the economy. So, at any rate, that's that, and we'll see what happens next. By the way, if you like these videos, please subscribe, give me a like if you do, and you can ring the bell for notifications, and comments are appreciated. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of the way it is. I think that there's an increasing concern that eventually there'll be a recession due to this, although at the present time the economy is still going up, and we'll get some better ideas on that as time goes forward, as we're going into another earnings season. Interesting enough, the banks and financials have been down, so higher interest rates apparently haven't been too positive for them, even though one might think they would be. So that's kind of it. I think that in general that you have the Biden administration and trying to blame Putin for everything that's gone wrong. So I guess from his point of view, the war in Ukraine is fortuitous. Could that explain some of his reluctance to give certain weapons to Ukraine that they want? He wants it to continue so he can continue to have Putin in the news and therefore be able to blame Putin for the problems that we're having with our own economy. That's a possibility. I don't know if that's all. I think it may also be a desire not to have an escalatory war that could spin out of control also. But there could also be a subtle motivation there too. I just thought of it in the middle of the video here. Actually, that was a bit of an aside, unplanned, but it's interesting to think about. Well, anyhow, so that's kind of the way it is for the economy. Biden's approval ratings remain pretty low, and in the low 40s in the Rasmussen poll, which is kind of my benchmark poll. I think it's a little bit higher for Biden than some of the other polls, but overall, I tend to use that one, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, because often when the liberals are putting out fake polls that are, the Democrats are doing great, you go to Rasmussen and see that's not really right. Well, by being consistent, I also have to say if he's a few points higher than some of their polls, then I might say, well, You know, I still can't. It's surprising if any Democrat didn't get at least 40% of the vote. I tend to think even if the devil was a Democrat ticket on the Democrat ticket, he'd probably get 40% of the vote. But anyhow, um, so that is it for the economy here, and I think the sell-off at the end, what may be a situation where when big money is trying to get out of the market, they like to see something that can be taken by some parts of the market as positive news as a chance to start selling, and then they like to buy when everybody's panicking. That's kind of how they operate. And one of the main reasons for that is because since they deal in such great volumes of stock, their own actions affect the market. And so they want to go against the market in order to be able to not basically diminish their own success, if you will. Well, another piece of news, begging back to mention the war in Ukraine, I can't seem to not cover some of that. I understand today that 1,000 Ukrainian Marines that was defending Mariupol have now surrendered. They probably just ran out of ammunition and supplies, and wasn't much else to do there. And so it looks like the fall of Mariupol should be complete shortly. There could still be some local territorial people and armed residents still fighting. I don't know. But it looks like that they will have that. And so now we'll be into the next episode of the Russian activity. We might have noticed that a couple of days ago that there was this big convoy of Russian troops coming from the Belarus area and heading into eastern Ukraine. And so we're not sure exactly what the Russians have planned next. I mean, a minimalistic plan would be just to reinforce their position and be prepared for any kind of Ukrainian offensive that they would choose to launch. Maybe tidy up some of their defensive positions, or in order to have a better defense line. That'd be one approach. And the other approach would be probably to launch a offensive with troops freed up from the Mariupol siege and the new troops coming in from the north, and try to do a pincer movement and try to basically cut off the Ukrainian army that's in the eastern Ukraine and try to destroy it. And that would then give them a better position. They could presumably now conquer the Donbass areas that they wanted to quote liberate, unquote. Their words, not mine. It's like getting liberated by the Chinese People's Liberation Army. It could be a liberating experience, right? Not really. Just look at the people in Shanghai, how they're getting locked in their apartments. But anyway, the point I'm making is this may be what they do, and if they're more aggressive, and they may want to do it partly just to, I guess, regain their honor a little bit. I mean, the Kiev campaign was, what could we say, kind of a humiliating outcome, and I think that they may feel that doesn't represent them at their best. And there's some reasons for that. And so if they were able to successfully defeat the eastern Ukrainian army there, that would be both improve their own defensive position in the long run and give them a, quote, victory for their Victory Day celebration. Of course, if they try to do it and fail again, that'll diminish their propaganda a lot. So, at any rate, we don't know. I think those are the two options I really see ahead of them. I think they've totally failed in the idea of conquering Ukraine for the time being, and now they're down to much limited objectives. And I think they want to come up with some kind of an outcome that they can portray in their biased media, their propaganda media, you want to call it, as a success. I think that's what they're planning on doing. And the question is how much risk they're going to take to do that. One thing we really don't know yet, I don't think we have a good handle on exactly how bad they were mauled in the whole war on Kyiv. You have to realize that it looks to me like a lot of the units that were sent in there never really got into combat. They were going down very narrow roads and they were subjected to various kinds of ambushes, but even taking into account the number of vehicles that were destroyed, even if you take the Ukrainian claims on that, there's only 3 people in a Russian tank. And assuming they were all completely killed every time they were hit, and that may be the case with kind of the weapons that are being used, these javelins and this NLAW weapon developed by the British and the Swedes, I guess really made of a Swedish development, those have a tendency to inflict maximum losses on the tank. And I guess I'm beginning to understand the concept of this new T-14 tank, which hasn't showed up yet, where you don't have any people in the turret. I'm beginning to see maybe where that idea came from. But they haven't been able to have enough money to build those yet, so they're still using their old equipment from the Soviet era. So anyhow, and when things like the NLAW and the Javelin didn't exist at that time. But anyhow, that digressing a little bit into that, but that does indicate the situation they're facing here. I'm just questioning whether they don't have a fair number of usable units that they withdrew that could still be used in the East that really didn't see a lot of action because they basically never got into it. Now, the ones on the spearhead points, you can see how they were pretty badly mauled. If you look at some of the pictures from Duka, for instance, that just looks like the whole street's full of blown up Russian vehicles. But again, what was that? A battalion? Really. So I don't know. I mean, the Ukrainians are claiming stupendous casualties, which would almost be equivalent to the entire northern force being wiped out. And I don't think that happened. My guess is Russian numbers are obviously ludicrously low. My personal guess is probably somewhere in the 5,000 KIA and maybe 15,000 wounded, something like that, which is a lot lower than everybody in the West is claiming and a lot higher than what the Russians is claiming. That's just me guessing, but hey, I guess officially I'm not an expert, so I'll wait and see what happens on that. But I think that may be a more reasonable. It's still a serious loss, and I don't think it was what they expected. We do know this much, that the casualties were high enough that they had to go to civilian blood banks because they didn't stockpile enough for treatment of the wounded. So that goes to show it was definitely above their expectations. Well, anyhow, we'll have to see what the next move that Russia makes next in the Donbass area, whether they go for the more offensive approach or whether they just go on the defensive. Because like I said all along, I think that both sides in terms of negotiations are completely intransigent. The Ukrainians apparently are unwilling to give up any land for peace, and the Russians obviously can't afford to give it up unless they're truly defeated, because if they were, I mean, they might bring down the regime, and obviously the regime doesn't want to be brought down, and therefore that's their value. In fact, both sides are pretty much willing to accept human losses in order to achieve goals of territory or prestige. And so it is. So we'll have to wait and see what happens next, but that's kind of my assessment of the situation. I still think the ultimate outcome may well be a Russian defensive perimeter of undetermined size with the Ukrainians on the other side, and they just go to a ceasefire because both sides run out of initiative. There's also the danger that if too much armament flows into Ukraine, they might get too offensive, and Russia might be forced to escalate things quite a bit in order to save themselves. And that's one of the things I think we should try to avoid. And the key thing I think is that we've saved most of Ukraine here in a sense, although we've sort of got it destroyed in order to save it. So anyhow, it's sad, but the way it is. Well, anyhow, by the way, links to my well, not links. I keep saying that. It's the address of my social media account. As far as links, they're just a normal, Twitter.com, Parler.com, etc. In the description below. And until next time.